Hi there, it's Sharon and welcome to my studio. Today I have a peek at the newest 10 colors of alcohol ink from Tim Holtz and Ranger. There are 10 new colors. There's Brick, Cosmopolitan, Bayou, Yonder, Juniper, Chronicle, Wilderness, Smudge, Gravel, and Flannel. And I'm going to show you how I swatch my alcohol inks today. And I'll also do a few quick demos with you with some of these new colors, showing you some of the combinations that I've liked so far. So I'm going to go ahead and just use my glass mat. I like to place the alcohol inks here on the glass mat and put the cap of the bottle right behind it. If you know me, I'm a very messy maker, and sometimes my caps would get all over the place, and then I'd wind up putting something like my red cap right on top of the yellow alcohol ink. So I'm going to try to avoid that today. So I'm just going to set everything up here, and then I'll go through with you and show you how I swatch my alcohol inks. I like to swatch all of my distressed products, so as I get new products, I just add to my swatch rings, and I have a swatch ring for every different product. So I have one for my alcohol inks, distress inks, distress oxides, mica stains, and now distress spritz. And what I do to organize all of my products is keep everything on a fairly sizable ring. These are all the distress inks I had before this new release. So they're all on this big ring. They're not labels on the front, they're labels on the back. And the reason I like to do that is just because when I am working with color, I like everything to be intuitive. So I don't want to go looking for a certain color I have in mind, but rather just look at it on the swatch and pick what I'm feeling that day. Now the rings that I'm using for my swatches are just these 3-inch rings. I have a whole big box of them that I got from Amazon. I'll link those below. And then what I do with those rings when I have them all together is just keep all of my swatches on a big 6-inch ring like this. So I'll link all of that, but everything hangs on a cart near my table. So for the newest colors, I kept them separate for now. I have them on their own ring, just so because when I was working with them, I wanted to be able to just say, these are the new colors, this is what I'm working with. So I'll kind of go through the swatches with you. This one is Brick, so it is like a brick reddish color. This one, Cosmopolitan, it's a beautiful pink. It's not like any of the other pinks that we already have in Alcohol Ink, so that was fun to compare to my swatches that I have. This one is Bayou. It's kind of like I want to say like a blue. It has a blue, but a tiny bit of green gray in it. Blue. Then there's this really vibrant blue. This is going to be perfect for water and things for the summer, called Yonder. Then we have Juniper, which is a beautiful green that I just love. And then Chronicle, and this is one of the reasons I swatch out my alcohol inks like this, is I kind of put them on my swatch. I use blending solution, and I will show you right after this how I do that. But then I can see where the ink starts to separate, what other underlying colors there are. So in this Chronicle, I do see a lot of like brownish, rusty red in there. So I'll show you that a little more closely. Sort of the same thing. This is Wilderness, so that's a darker green. But I'm also seeing a little bit of like the brown tones on the edge. Then we have the grays, we have the smudge color. There's also gravel. And then there is flannel. And I'm going to set them all out aside because when I first got all these inks, I was like, why are there so many grays? And the more I played around with them, I realized why. So this one is like a really warm gray. This is kind of in the middle, and I feel like it does have some kind of like brown undertones to it. And then this flannel is a really cool gray to me. So they kind of work differently with all the different colors, and I will go ahead and mix some of those into the samples that we'll be making later today. So for the swatches, I'm just using pieces of Yupo paper. This is the paper that Ranger sells. I know other people use a lot of other different kinds of paper, but I know that Ranger sells this, and it goes with the alcohol ink and it works. So that's what I'm sticking with. It also comes in a translucent version, which is cool on some other kinds of cards, but for swatching today, we're just going to use the white. And I'll just do a couple of swatches with you to show you how I make them. And then we'll move on to some demo pieces, but I'm just using a little bit of blending solution. I'll use kind of maybe like my 3 kind of favorite colors so far, Cosmopolitan, of course. And then I just use a little blending solution, move it around on the paper, and then I'm going to let it dry. And while this is still wet, I'll go ahead and wipe this up. And then for the next one, do the same thing, just a couple of drops of the blending solution. This one I really like as well, Chronicle, so we'll just do a few drops of that. Go ahead and use the blower tool just to move it around. You could dry these with the heat tool, or you can let them dry. When I was making mine, I did them all at once, so I just kind of put each one to the side and let it dry. And then let's try out the juniper color as well. So we'll go ahead and just do a few drops of that. And the same thing. Just blend it around, and once mine were dried, I gave them all a label on the back. You could write on the back with a Sharpie, however you want to label them. And then I just put them on the ring. So that's the easiest way for me to make them. I just make them on Yupo paper. I don't cut tags or anything, and that way they're always the same size. And whenever I add new inks or new mediums to my distress collection, I can go ahead and just add that same size to the ring. So now that's done, let's take a look at some of the color combos. I'll show you some color combos, and we can do a few things with Alcohol Lift ink and maybe use some stencils and Reinker and just have a play with some of the color combos, just using the 10 colors that are new. You can always mix them with other colors that are in the line, and I'll have another video showing you some of my favorite combos with new and old coming soon. So as far as swatching out the whole new palette, if we want to just take a look at it all together, I'm just going to put a little dot of each color, kind of let it go where it might, just so you can see all the new colors together that are in this palette. And this is what the color looks like straight out of the bottle. We don't have any blending solution. So again, we have the brick, we have Cosmopolitan, we have Bayou, Yonder, Juniper. This is Chronicle, Wilderness, Smudge, Gravel, and Flannel. And again, you can see the 3 grays together again, all have different properties. Looking at this Chronicle, you can see, like I said before, it has like a little bit of red, rusty color. Once it starts blending out, the Juniper is showing like this kind of yellowy green. So we'll put that aside. So what I have here is just some regular white Yupo paper. It's not the translucent. I also have a piece of the translucent so you can see what that looks like. But we'll be working with the white today. We can also do a couple of things with some of the black Dura Lar paper, which I'll show you when we get to that. But for now, let's work on the white. So these sheets come in, I believe it's 5x7 size. If you're just going to do some experiments and you're new to alcohol ink and you don't want to use a whole piece of this paper, it is a little expensive, you can always cut it in half, which makes a great 3.5x5 size panel for putting on the front of a card, or even cut it in quarters if you just want to play around with some things. I'm going to go ahead and use a whole sheet today. So obviously starting just the same way that we made our swatches with some blending solution. And we'll go ahead and try some colors. I think for this first one, we'll just go with all of the blues and the greens. So this is Juniper. We'll add a little bit here, and I'm just dripping them on a little bit of Yonder. And I'm also going to mix in some of the Chronicle. This is the one where I showed you on the swatches that it kind of mixes with red. And then for the gray, I think we'll go ahead and use the smudge here. So you can see that kind of looks, when I put it next to the Chronicle, like it has the sort of warm greenish gray undertone. And then I'm just going to start moving the ink around with the ink blower. And I kind of want to make everything move together. You can always add more ink. So if you think certain areas are really light, or if you're looking to make your panel darker, like I'd like to add a little bit more Yonder right here. And then maybe just add some up on the top. So fill in those areas. And depending on how much you want it to move, you can use the blower with it. You can also add some more blending solution to your panel, and that should make things blend together. You'll see the ink starts to move that way. And I'll go ahead and just start blending that around with the ink blower. Now I like how it's looking so far. I feel like I added a lot of Yonder in, and I started to lose some of the greens that I had in there, so I'm going to add some of that back. And just repeat the process of using the blower, moving everything around. You can definitely leave white space if you want. I kind of like to cover up the whole panel. It's pretty covered up. Also, if I'm making a bunch of alcohol ink backgrounds, I will just spend like an afternoon doing a whole bunch at once. And then keeping them just in a little container, so when I'm ready to make a card and I need something quick, I have a beautiful panel. So we'll go ahead and dry this one. So this will be great for me to use for a background. One of the other things that we can do with this panel while I have it out, to give it some more texture, is to stamp on it with some Alcohol Lift ink. So I'll show you how that works. So this is Alcohol Lift ink, and what this ink is designed to do is to lift the color from non-porous surfaces. Mine is a little dirty. I've used it in some classes, but yours should look clear. But it won't. This won't really affect anything that we're doing today. The other thing that I'm going to do is use this new Tidbits stamp set to remove the ink, and I'll show you how that works. I also have a piece of distressed watercolor cardstock, and I'll show you what we're going to do with that, but you might want to get that ready as well. And I will put my panel to the side for just a second. So what we're going to do with this Tidbit stamp set, this has a whole bunch of little like numbers and letters, and just as one whole stamp, even though it is multiple small stamps, I'm going to use it as one entire stamp for the background. And I'm just going to ink it up really well. And then what I'm going to do is take my panel. So I'm going to put this panel face down, inky side down, onto the stamp where I've put Alcohol Lift ink. Move this watercolor panel out of the way. I'm going to bring in a piece of scrap paper and just lay it over the stamp set. I'm going to keep my hand on it just so it doesn't move. And I'm going to go over it with some like firm pressure, but not super hard. We're not like trying to smush the stamp, just kind of get some even pressure on the whole panel that we put down. So I'll go that way. I'll also go this way. And that should be good. I'll lift up the panel, get that out of the way. And you can see probably a very light images there where we put the panel against the alcohol ink. The one other thing that I'm going to do all of that ink where I put the alcohol lift ink should have lifted onto this stamp. So this is why I have this piece of distressed watercolor cardstock. Before I use my lift ink on the other panel, I'm just going to go ahead and press this down before I clean it and get this ink off of here. And this will be a background for something else. So you can see all the ink that lifted off is now on here. We'll just put that out of the way, but that's something that you can do when you're creating with this. The other thing that I have right now is just a clean bunched up paper towel. And what we're going to do to remove this ink is we're going to dab the ink, and you'll want to use like a different part of the paper towel for each area. You want to just use a clean part of the paper towel. And then I'm just dabbing off the lift ink, so I'm kind of like absorbing that lift ink into my paper towel. And then I'll get another clean part, and we'll go ahead and just buff it from the top. And that's where you can see the lift ink really start to work. We've removed the ink by dabbing it, and now we're just going to rub off any excess. So that's making a really cool background. Which kind of, to me, it's like very earthy, but this is something that I can add into my stash and use for another time. So for this one, I'll start the same way by using the blending solution. And just put that all over my piece. And this time we'll start with, we'll do some reds. We'll use the Cosmopolitan, do some pinks and some reds. We'll also add a little bit of the brick in there, and I'm just going to start by adding a little bits in at first. And this has the like kind of rusty red undertone, so I am going to add a few drops of the Chronicle, which I showed you before in the swatches. It did have that same sort of undertone, so hopefully it will go together. And then we'll go ahead and add a little bit of flannel, so that really cool gray color. We'll go ahead before I add anything else and just move around what I have here. I really like how this is looking. I like how the Cosmopolitan is looking under everything. It kind of has that like neon sort of quality. I'll add a couple of extra drops here of that. I also like how the Cosmopolitan is mixing with the flannel color, and it's making like a little bit of a purpley. So I'm going to add a little bit more there, and just to cover up this panel. And I like how it's moving. I like what's going on here. I'm going to go ahead and just dry it quickly, just so nothing else really moves around. Okay, and once I start to dry it, I'm going to look and see where I might want to add a little more color in some spots. It's definitely going to start moving the color. Maybe add a tiny bit more brick just down to the bottom. Another dot up here. And then we'll move that stuff around. And then maybe a little Chronicle just in the center to kind of break it up. Same thing, I'll also go ahead and move this color around. Now for this panel, it's pretty much dry. I'm just going to give it a little And then what I'm going to do with this, I want to add some splatter to it. I think this would be fun for like a background for a birthday card. I'm going to use just some isopropyl alcohol. This is the 90, I think it's 91% alcohol. So I'm just going to put some in here because I want to splatter it. I have a lot going on my mat. And then I'll use a small Ranger paintbrush. So I want to splatter on this. I have a lot going on the mat, so I put some alcohol in here. It's the 91%. So I have my alcohol in this little jar. I'm using this Ranger paintbrush. This is the number 4 size. It's a little small one. And I'm just going to splatter the alcohol over the panel. And I don't want these dots to move too much, so I'm going to give it a quick dry. And that's what that looks like. So while I have this out and I'm adding splatter, I'm going to add some of this. This is foundry wax, some of the gilded foundry wax over this panel. So to use that, I just take the foundry wax. I usually just put it on my glass mat. I'm going to mix that up with a few drops of alcohol to make it easier to splatter, and just do the same thing. So you stir it up when it's probably like a gravy sort of consistency, I guess, and just splatter it all over my panel. You'll see the splatters. When you use this foundry wax to make it set, you're going to want to heat emboss it. And be careful when you're heat embossing on this Yupo paper. What I like to do is just to let my heat gun get really hot before I start messing around and trying to emboss it. So we'll do that. Make sure it's really hot. And then we'll work quickly on the Yupo paper. You're going to see that color start to change. And I'm just going to set this panel aside. So now that this panel is done, I thought it would be fun to add just a little bit of texture to the panel. So I'm going to use the Alcohol Lift ink. This is the Reinker. And I'm also going to use one of these tiny foam blending tools along with stencils to remove ink. So this is just a different way, kind of like the stamping that we just did. This is a different way to remove ink. And what I'm doing is just putting a little of the Alcohol Lift ink onto my glass mat, and then tapping it and kind of like tapping it off and spreading it around. So I was thinking of possibly turning this into a birthday card, this background. I'm going to use some numbers, and what I'm doing is just lightly going over the inked up panel with the foam blending tool. So just on part of the panel, and I'll remove it, and you can see it's starting to remove that ink. The same kind of thing that we did with the stamping, we're just doing it ourselves this time through the stencil. I know we have circles on here, but I also thought it would be fun to add some bigger areas. So it's really light because we have a lot of layers going on, but you can see the circles getting removed in there. And then for the bottom part, I'm going to use this very dirty stencil with a lot of X's on it and just do the same thing. So just adding some texture without adding any bulk, or some layers without any bulk to our project. And you can see there also those little X's. So that one will be great. Like I said, I think I'm going to use this one for a birthday card. And then we'll just do one more technique. So for our last technique, we're going to use this. This is Alcohol Ink Dura Bright paper. So this is black paper. This is made by Graphics. And this one feels kind of plasticky. So it's a matte, smooth surface. And I'll show you how it looks here. So it feels kind of plasticky. And obviously to get any of these ink colors to show on here, we're going to need to put something with it. So for this, we're going to use some Snow Cap Mixative, and you'll see how that works. And you're going to want to shake that up really well. And we'll do this panel in a similar fashion to the other panel that we did. Again, like I said, if you're just practicing with these, feel free to cut up your paper into smaller pieces. And that way you can practice or try out different colors. And I'm just going to add some of that on, just kind of in a pattern where I want my stuff to flow, I'm going to once again use Cosmopolitan. I'm also going to use some Bayou this time. So we have like the pink, we have the blue. I think I'm going to need a little bit more mixative here in the center. And then I'm also going to mix in just a bit of the gravel this time. It might be too dark. We'll see how that comes out. And we'll go ahead and just start moving that around as well. And you'll see, I do actually like how the gravel is looking here. You'll see that the white snow-cut mixative is what you need to make everything, everything visible on the black. So let me be careful, pick that up a little bit. I'm gonna go ahead and wipe off my mat because I got quite a bit of ink and mixative there. I think that looks cool, but I do want to add a little bit more into it. So I'm gonna give it a quick dry. And then I'll just add the same color, so maybe just a tiny bit more mixative. We might even have enough already. And I'll go back in. I lost a lot of the Cosmopolitan in there. So I'll add that in. It's looking pretty good. I'm going to add just a little bit more of the Bayou, maybe on the parts where there's a lot of white showing. And move that around. Let's just move some of this Cosmopolitan back in. I think that's looking pretty good. I'm going to move that out of the way and just clean off my mat one more time. And I think with this one, I'm just going to keep it as is. I'm not really sure what I want to use this for yet. It could just have some die cuts on top, but I think it is a pretty great background on its own. So I hope you enjoyed just taking a little peek at the new colors with me, making a few backgrounds. If there's something else that you'd like to see that I didn't show you today, please let me know in the comments. Thanks so much for stopping by today. If you like this video, I'd love for you to give it a thumbs up, and thanks so much for watching.